Hey, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, everybody. This is Justin Roth with JamPlay.com, back for week 10 of Expressive Acoustic Guitar. I can't believe we're here already. Today, we are going to dig into kind of these miscellaneous grab bag of things that we did not cover in the last 9 weeks. Kind of multiple different things that you can try, all of which are kind of small little right and left hand focused moves or techniques that you can try out. So really this is going to kind of be a presentation of a bunch of like little bite-sized things. So I'm going to encourage as many questions as you guys have got today too, just to whether it's about what I'm doing in the moment or anything else that we haven't covered in the last 10 weeks that you're curious about. This is going to kind of be the last chance to fire off some of those questions and be able to address some of those things. And I'll do what I can to answer those questions as best I can on the fly. But so we're gonna break this down into more or less two parts. We're gonna just focus on teaching some right-hand technique things, which you're gonna have to do with some tone control stuff, which we covered very early on in the first week. But kind of taking that and going a little bit further with some of it. So there's some tone control things, there's some percussive things, and then we're going to go to the left hand and show also percussive and other more kind of melodic ideas that you can do with your left hand. And this is kind of incorporating little tidbits of things that we've already talked about, but it's kind of taking them and how to utilize them even to greater extent and even show, I guess, and then there's plenty of other new things too that we haven't covered at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off this last workshop here. I'm going to play an entire song, which pretty much utilizes something from just about every week of this course. So it's gonna be doing some right hand tone control things, both in strumming from the low to high strings, strumming from the bridge up to the neck. Again, you can go back and review some of those things that we've done, but you'll see it kind of all in context here. I'm in an altered tuning. I'm in Dad-Gad. I'm using a partial capo and a standard capo, so we had a lesson on those. We didn't do a lesson on partial capos in Dad-Gad or in altered tunings because that is a much larger nut to crack, and so that's another thing that maybe we'll do in the future. So it's got that, altered tunings, some hammer-ons and pull-offs, some percussive things, the snare or kick drum thing that we covered in the finger picking week. See, what else am I forgetting? I think that kind of breaks down a bunch of the things that we talked about. And this song kind of utilizes them all in varying degrees throughout the song, kind of sprinkled throughout. And so I'm just going to play this just so you can hear some of these things all in context. And then I'm going to start to break down. We're going to start with the right hand, go on to the left hand, and I'll be able to use examples from the song so that it's kind of, you have some set of context. So this is a song that I wrote called Trembling Like a Train. Midnight falls in Rotterdam at the Golden Tulip Inn. I'm standing in the rain, wondering which of these wet tracks to take. Now it's time to choose, and I'm trembling like a train, 'cause I gave away my ticket overnight to Saint-Tropez. You may think I'm crazy, that's okay. I swear this place is damned, I'm still standing here, and I'm feeling a bit insane, listening to the rooster crow. I'm frozen to the core, and I'm trembling like a train. The sun is always shining on the beach in Saint-Tropez. much left to lose, and I'm trembling like a train. I'll be waiting at the station when it pulls in with a wheeze. Pull down on that whistle, let me hear it screaming through the trees. I'm burning like hay. Here's time to get away. There's so much left to lose, and I'm trembling like a train, and I'm trembling like a train, and I'm trembling like a train. Ah. All right, there you have it. Trembling like a train. Okay, so well, we're going to start. Let me just start at the beginning here. Like I said, I'm utilizing a lot of things that we have already talked about, but then there's another handful of things that we have not talked about yet. So I'm going to kind of sprinkle those in here. So you notice, I'm playing with fingers, not a pick, so it's more finger style stuff. One of the things with the angles of the camera, I'm hoping that you're able to see the right hand and kind of the strumming technique in this one. Again, it's different from the idea of we're not approaching this finger style where every finger is on a string and we're picking out a pattern like we learned. It's not holding a pick and strumming all the strings. You may have noticed there's a lot of this, like this thumb that's just kind of more or less sweeping across the strings. I call this the thumb sweep strum. I just made that up. However, I love the texture I'm able to get from this. And if you have a long thumbnail, which I encourage, this again, we've talked about nails before, this is a fake nail. So that way I've got some brightness, I've got more of a pick sound when I want it. But for the most part, I'm strumming with just the side of my thumb. So if I really do it really lightly, we're not really getting, the individual strings. We're getting the kind of this soft version of the strum without any attack. But when I want some attack, I'll use my thumb as an upstroke, and that's where the thumbnail comes in handy. I can use it as an accent. As I've talked about before, whether it's with a partial capo or altered tuning, using these high strings by separating where we strum on the low strings and using the high strings kind of as accents, or maybe like a drummer would use cymbals. So that way we're able to kind of create these kind of splashes of color while our chord is kind of chugging along underneath. So I'll just kind of start adding these things one at a time just to demonstrate here. So we've got the fleshy thumb with little upstrokes for little splashes of color. Here's where, well, that's left hand. We'll get to the hammer-on pull-offs later, so maybe I'll minimize that. The other thing is for the snare and kick idea, where we kind of get this click, or the thump for the kick. Here, I'm kind of... It's a little bit different from the way we did before. Before, we kind of just showed how the thumb kind of swings and hits. This is kind of doing two things, and I'll slow it down and break them into two parts. The fingers are more kind of like splashing outwards. They're from, if I'm holding it like this, they're kind of going like this, so that all the fingers together are more or less hitting the strings together, which gets a little bit of the click. Like if I mute the strings, That's the percussive attack that we're getting from it. But at the same time, instead of me just doing the thumb click, which doesn't encourage any other strings to ring out, here I'm able to get like a slight strum, and I'm not hitting the strings very hard, but I'm hitting them hard enough where I get the click of the fingers, so it gets like a snare plus a splash of the chord, while before when we broke it down it was more about almost stopping some of the notes that weren't already ringing and just getting a click in one spot that we did that was in week 3 when we had introduced that finger picking pattern that had the click in it. So that's going to lead right into this next thing. And again, we're encouraged as many questions as you feel that come up for you in this lesson, because I'm going to be kind of jumping from one thing to the next just to demonstrate, break them down, and then we'll go back and hear it all in context again.
We do have a question.
Okay, great.
For somebody who doesn't have the capos you do, is there a way that they could follow along trying this out with you and not have it sound bad?
Yeah, if you're in DADGAD, just skip this one. This is that shortcut 3-string capo. So yeah, that I'll right now all it's going to affect is I won't be able to demonstrate the hammer-on pull-off thing, but I can do that later when we get to the left hands. So more or less, just be in DADGAD with the capo on the 2nd fret. Because just to explain, that shortcut capo was covering the 3rd, 4th, and 5th string, and right now I'm doing a power chord on the 3rd, 4th, 5th string, so it doesn't even change the voicing I was getting. The only reason, or the main reason why I have that shortcut capo there is because I was doing that little pull-off thing, so I'd get that little lick. So we'll break that down in a little bit. But yeah, you can follow along DADGAD, capo 2nd fret, and I'm just doing a power chord up on the 5th fret above the capo. Okay, thanks for that question. So we got the thumb strum. I'm going to slow it down just a little bit, especially if some of you are putting your guitars on and tuning up, to be able to try this. So this is kind of a combination of the thumb strum, which is nice and soft, but I'm able to get this nice percussive click just by letting my thumb click on the strings again. And once you feel you've got that, so my thumb is hitting at the same time as my fingers are going out to get that little strum. So it's kind of like, you know, I'm trying to see where it's on camera here. You know, my hand comes down and more or less goes boom. Like it kind of explodes, minor explosion. And it's controlled explosion, because what we don't want is, we don't want to be like cranking on the strings. We're going for like a subtle strum, but enough to get this click. And really, I'm just a pivot at these knuckles. These fingers are staying more or less bent, so it doesn't have to flare out so much. That's a kind of the exaggerated version. So you may have noticed then, I was kind of already doing it by default, but in the song, every once in a while I do, I'll do it and then we'll kind of figure out what to call it, because these techniques don't necessarily have like an official name. I've kind of come to some of these sounds not from a technician or clinician side of trying to apply techniques necessarily to the song. In my head, as I'm playing guitar or playing whatever song it is, I'm usually trying to accomplish some sort of effect or sound that I hear in my head, and then I find a way to execute it on the guitar. So these all kind of came as a result of wanting not only the percussive element, but to me, I guess primarily the percussive element, because the percussive part, to me, again, as a solo player, I've got nobody else to rely on to provide that groove, to provide like fills more or less, like a drummer would potentially do. A good drummer, maybe, who doesn't overplay too much. That's the goal, both in this guitar as well. But what I like to think of as is kind of like this rake click or rake snare sound. To me, is going for the idea of like a drummer doing like a drum roll into the downbeat, like ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum. So here it goes. So it's kind of, and to slow it down kind of makes my right hand not necessarily cooperate exactly, but to break it into a few pieces, it starts with an upstroke of the thumb. This is again where the long fingernail comes in handy, but if you just have a regular fingernail, it's still going to work just fine because you're still raking the nail side up the string, so you should still have some sort of clarity and snap to it, an attack. So it's a combination of rolling up like that, and as the thumb gets to the top, you can see how my hand is kind of curved. That's when the wrist drops, and as the wrist drops, these fingers, this is exaggerated again, kind of flare out to get that little strum. So it's like a rake. It's almost like two strums in one. One's an upstroke, and the other fingers are doing a downstroke. But they happen in a short amount of time, so it sounds like a drum roll. Brum. I'm going to try to keep slowing it down so you can but still hear the effect. So it's got upstroke, and with the downstroke comes the click as well, where my thumb is kind of hitting that low string. So let's hear it in context once. And again, I don't have the partial capo, so I won't do the little hammer-on riff. I can't, it's hard to play without doing it. And I'm just primarily doing that upstroke rake into the downbeat of the 1. That way, and this pretty much continues throughout most of the song, with the idea that like that is the boom, that's the snare drum. So we never lose sense of that groove. That's potentially where all the Midwestern people would clap as well. No, actually, Midwestern people will clap on the 1 instead of on the 2 where the snare is. But anyway, so that's kind of putting those two things together. And so within that verse section, you'll see that there's I'm also doing finger pick things, but it's more of like a finger strum than it is the finger picking individual notes and individual strings that we learned in weeks 3 and 4. It's kind of doing the opposite. We have this little downstroke splash that has the click to it, but then sometimes as I'm strumming and with the thumb, then those fingers are doing almost like a little all together and upstroke kind of grab on the strings, or not quite a grab, otherwise it would snap, but a sweep. Let's call it a sweep. So I'll slow it down. So there it is. So kind of combining a lot of different things here. We got another question?
Yeah, R. Weiss, forgive me if I said it wrong, says, and you also dampen with the heel of your hand?
Yeah, so, and that's not necessarily calculated for every time that I'm wanting to do it. Like I'm not saying I only do it on beat 3, but chances are when I do this little percussive stop, a lot of times that click is coming because my thumb is resting on the low string, which more or less would be muting it. So that is happening sometimes. And usually what I would do is like in the context of the song, say for the verse, or maybe it starts with that intro or instrumental thing, and that's like full, no muting. And then when I get to the verse, midnight falls in Rotterdam at the Golden Tulip Inn. Then it's a combination of my thumb and or the heel of my hand that's kind of muting, just so that it's just trying to bring the tonality of everything that's happening. And this is kind of the idea behind, again, with this course. It's like finding ways to not only spice up your playing, but knowing how to create more contrast within the song from start to finish. And using the mute is a great way to say, like, when you're singing, perhaps pull back on something. And so my hand is kind of resting just to understate the chord so that the chord isn't ringing out so much that it's getting in the way of the vocal. But then when I go to another section, maybe and I think the chorus is not muted. It's more open and ringing so that it feels bigger. You know, again, I don't have a band where the electric guitar comes in and on the chorus. So my idea is to say, figure out where the guitar needs to be less and then where it needs to be more. So thank you for noticing that mute too. Some of these things start to happen just intuitively in your playing as you're starting to, you know, not have to think about what the technique is and how to get your right hand to cooperate. Then it becomes being more subjective about the presentation and the performance of the song and finding what makes it work, what makes a certain vocal line work. Sometimes when there's a lyric that you really want to highlight, instead of singing it louder, you just pull everything else that you're playing back. So that some of that stuff starts to happen in the moment, as opposed to, you know, thinking like on which beats you mute and having to keep track of like this whole database of moves on different beats throughout the song. So yeah, so they've got some muting going on. And I know that kind of subconsciously there's times too where based on tone, which we talked about in the first week, you know, the closer I pick to the bridge, the brighter it is, as opposed to up here. There's a little more snap back here. So that's the kind of like moves kind of fluidly throughout the song as a way of just trying to constantly be balancing the different tonal colors. So we've got that upstroke rake, which I know that one's one that you need to really slow down and break it into parts where you're just getting this. Try incorporating the little thumb sweep strum, we'll call it again, where it's just the meat of the side of your thumb. A lot of times we're thinking of picking our fingers pointed down. This one's kind of like parallel to the strings. Start with that, and then use the upstroke with your thumb to create those accents. And then once you feel you've got that, you can add the little, kind of the loose fist of fingers that are doing the downstroke to get a little extra click and a little strum in it. Okay, so a couple other things. So we got the upstroke of the thumb, got the fingers going down, we've got the kind of combination of the upstroke and the downstroke at the same time as the kind of drum roll into the downbeat, along with taking your wrist. Again, this is a slight exaggeration because not trying to create big motions here, but I'm just trying to demonstrate subtly what's happening. You know, when I upstroke and do those fingers down, it's not just a finger movement with my wrist being locked. It's kind of turning the wrist, pulling the wrist down towards the strings so that they snap on their own. It's almost like I'm not necessarily using finger strength to flick them out. It's almost like the inertia of me slamming my wrist down, not slamming, but doing that, it just kind of makes the fingers fly out. And that helps me from trying to like power my way through it and really just banging on the strings, because subtlety is really going to be the key to making these things work so that they don't seem like you're overdoing it. Another kind of cool thing, this is kind of jumping to a different thing, but it's still a kind of tone control. It's something we have not done in any of the other workshops at this point. And this is something that you might find yourself doing, say at the end of like a sweet song or something that maybe feels a little more jazzy. I think of this kind of, again, in drummer's terms, I think of it as the end of the song where the drummer's got brushes and he's on his crash or his ride cymbal and he's going kind of the little subtle splash outro. So I lay in my hand back here, and it can either be muted, muting the strings, or not. And I'm using my ring finger just because of the position of my hand. It's the one that's closest to it. Aside in the pinky, I just can't get as much fine motor movement out of it. And it's rubbing with the outside of the finger. And I mean, you could do this in the context of a song too, but say the song ends like this. And there you go. And you can even fade it out. So that's kind of like a little tremolo effect. I've seen it used very effectively by some other folks, and I thought it was a pretty tasty little thing. That again, it's not something you're going to use on every song. You're not going to use it very often, but it's a pretty neat sound. Who knows? Maybe you can write an entire song with that. And if you do that, make a video and send it to me. So these are just all subtle ways to break up tonally what we're getting. Again, if you're, this is kind of taking that finger style or the finger picking patterns that we did and kind of leaving those behind, but using our fingers for the sense that we can get the variety of multiple tones by strumming with our hands. And it's almost like we have at least two different strumming devices. We have the thumb, which kind of mimics a pick, especially if we're using the nail. But here we've got that softer pick on the edge of the thumb, which you're not going to be able to get with a regular standard pick, plastic pick or tortoise shell or whatever fancy thing you use. And then the way that we use our other fingers as the strum with the percussive thing. Now there are also times in this song where I'm doing the same thing, but then I'm starting to pick out individual notes because it became this little hook line. And I'm going to put the partial capo back on just so I can demonstrate this, because this is a lick I would not be able to do without it. So again, what this was doing was helping with the main riff. I'm getting that note by having it there, and that's the main place I use that throughout this entire song. So there's a little instrumental break in the middle, and I'm just going to slow it down. It's using the right hand technique. A lot of those are still happening, and we're going to kind of use this as a way to transition into looking at some things that we can do with the left hand. Play that again. So aside from the notes that I'm fretting, I'm using I think every one of the open strings that are held by the capo. I'm just going to pick it out once so we can see where those are. So I guess I don't use the fourth string open on the capo, but I am using the fifth and the third string at some point. The great thing about that open string that's covered by the capo, it's the third of this chord. If you remember in Dadgad tuning, that shape would have looked like this. To get that third, major third, just a half step behind our stacked fingers, but because this has got it, I can do it with one finger, and that third rings out. So, all the while, the right hand is still kind of keeping that click happening. The strumming is getting simplified a little bit so that I can articulate the melody. But, again, the beauty of Dadgad is that the notes that we're letting ring out, namely the low string and the top two strings, gives us a sense that the chord is still happening underneath this lead line. So, because those notes are ringing throughout. So there we go. You know, this melody, another melody, with or without the capo, finding things that you can be using this right-hand strummy technique with the percussive stuff. And if you want, you still have individual fingers to continue. So now we're kind of have three devices. We've got the thumb pick, the fist, or all the fingers together strumming, and then using, you know, 2 or 3 of the other fingers to pull out different melody ideas. And of course, this all comes in time. A lot of this becomes muscle memory, and it depends on the song that you're doing and what it is that you're trying to execute. But just seeing that all these things are available to us, and that's why I'll go back to something I said very early on in this course, is that a lot of people will say your left hand is what you know, meaning your scales and where your chord shapes are. But your right hand is who you are. Whether or not we 100% agree with that or not, the point is that the right hand can really change what's already happening with the left hand. So whatever prowess you feel you have or lack thereof over here, it's still okay. You can still do really simple stuff with the left hand. If you're not fast, you're not playing lead stuff, whatever it is. If you get some of these tone control things down and percussive things, you can really start to make a very simple guitar part sound like there's a lot going on. And when I say a lot going on, again, the goal is not to congest your guitar part to make it so busy, but there's a lot of contrast going on, not necessarily a lot of notes happening at the same time. That, again, is the kind of subjective goal of everything in this course, to develop that sense of taste, like when is it effective, when is it too much. So other left-hand things that are happening in this song, and I'm not trying to teach you this song, but this song kind of embodies a lot of different things that you can apply in different ways, whether you're in dadgad or in other tunings or whatever, or standard tuning altogether. One of my favorite things in this, and I don't know if you noticed this, but most of the downbeats of any of the fretted chords, which were the 4, you know, so with I didn't have this, the 4, the 5, and the minor 6, I'm not strumming on the downbeat of each of those. They are where I'm simply hammering on the chord. So it kind of serves two purposes. One, it means that my right hand can be doing other offbeat accents. 2, I can play the chord without actually strumming it. And 3, it has its own percussive nature to it. So what I'm referring to is just hammering on. And again, before our hammer-ons that we were talking about were single notes within a chord. Here I'm hammering on the entire chord. And this works especially well in dadgad when you've got this you know, root, 5th octave relationship of the strings, because I can hammer on a bar across 2 or 3 of those strings, and that chord is there. I'm not having to like try to hammer on a chord shape that's on different strings and different frets. So let me slow this down here. So this is kind of a simplified version of the strumming pattern I was doing. So the chords are happening without being strummed at all. And then my right hand is doing things on the offbeats to kind of create a sense of contrast. I'm going to try to incorporate one thing at a time. So I made that like kind of snare click, 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 click. And then in the accents on the high strings, again just kind of swinging my thumb. I'll take this off again for those of you without that partial capo. And then I could switch chords. Right hand's still doing more or less the same thing. And to help bring out this chord, like a hammer-on, typically what usually happens, not every time, but is that the open string below it, or whatever the note, the lower note would be, is strummed. And I'm kind of strumming with my thumb so that it goes. I mean, I could just, but this release, the pull-off portion, sometimes it's a result of a pull-off. That part where I get these low strings to ring. Other times it's a strum. That's where I'm kind of accenting it with the thumb. So it's got its own click to it, that chord. That sounds different from, it's got like a sharper attack, like it's almost got its own little snare hit or something. So, and it goes throughout in this song. Let me put this back here. And I get up. Another time when I'm using the notes that are covered by this is I simplified, instead of having to bar all of these notes to play, say, the 5 chord, I just end up playing those two. And I'm using some of the open strings that are ringing to here just to kind of create a more interesting chord. Then I started putting little hammer-ons and pull-offs in the bridge to create a little melodic movement in the mid register. So it's and just by changing up that chord, so it's more or less hammer-ons. So each new note I'm not strumming, but then I strum shortly thereafter. And that's like a little melodic idea that happens in between vocal phrases. So let me just try that bridge. I'll be waiting at the station when it pours in with the breeze. Pull down on that whistle. Let me hear it screaming through the trees. So you see, all those chords, the downbeat of each chord is hammered on instead of strummed, so that I can keep this kind of contextual, percussive groove thing going on all around it. Interspersing that with a couple little melodic ideas in between vocal phrases, because again, I don't want to step on the vocal. I never want to step on the vocal if I can help it. So usually some of these little extra melodic ideas will happen when I'm not singing, or they'll lead me into the next vocal line. So these hammered on chords, the great thing about this too, just to show you quickly, is if I was still in standard tuning, and I'm just going to demonstrate with the lower strings, say like on a G chord, I could do that. Now my top strings are not in, I haven't retuned these up, but this still works. So if we pretended I was in standard tuning, I'm not though. So these two fingers are going to be your strongest ones to be able to do this with. Now, if you were trying to hammer on a, a full-on C chord, I mean, this will still work with these two fingers too on another string. So you can experiment with that. Just know that getting the attack from a hammered-on chord instead of strumming the downbeat is a nice little way to kind of change up what you're doing. And if you do two songs back-to-back in the same key, maybe instead of feeling like, oh, they're the same key, they're the same chords, they sound the same, change up tonally what's happening. If the tempo's not different and it really does feel similar, by changing the tone of how you strum can create quite a bit of differentiation from one song to the next.
Hey, there was somebody asking for a little more information on the small capo.
Yes.
What it's called specifically and which brand you have.
So this was from week 5, I want to say. I think week 5 was, week 5 was the partial capo week. So this is a Kaiser shortcut capo. It only covers 3 strings. It covers the A, D, and G, or the 5th, 4th, and 3rd string. It's got the low string cut out so that rings all the way down to the next capo or the nut if I didn't have this on here. And it doesn't cover the top 2 strings. So you can find these at different music stores, but not all of them carry them. But if you have no luck or if you don't have a music store locally close by that's convenient, you can go to justinroth.bandcamp.com, and I've got them available there. These things, there's the shortcut. We have the drop D one, which we talked about, which I can just grab here real quick and show you. This was the 5-string version with the low string cut out, so it doesn't cover the low E, but it covers the top 5 strings. And the idea behind that one, and so that I don't get, I'm not in standard tuning, so I can't. The idea is that you can play a D chord with this capoed up a whole step. So we'd be hearing an E chord because it's a whole step higher. But instead of retuning our low string down to D, now it would create this root 5th octave relationship. Again, I tuned this low E up. So now it's creating a power chord on the lower strings, and my top 2 strings are tuned down, so the position is not going to be the same. But that's what the D chord would sound like, even though it would be living right here. So that's a super fast, short version. But go back to week 5, the archive of week 5, and we talk all about that. And there are other partial capo workshops on the Jamplay website that I teach, as well as a few other people that kind of take a lot of those concepts and go even deeper. So you can continue to look into that. So shortcut capo is a 3-string, and drop D is the 5-string, and they're both made by Kaiser. There are other companies that make them as well, but Kaiser has been my favorite for a long, long time.
And Kaiser is awesome because you get a free 7-day trial of Jamplay with a lot of their capos.
Yes.
Not sure if it's with every model or not.
Yeah. So more reasons to love the Kaiser. So let me get this back into the dadgad tuning. All right, there we go. So a couple other things, let's see, that I wasn't necessarily doing in this song, but just a couple other little right-hand things. Again, I said this is kind of a grab bag of different things. You might say, oh, I like the sound of that, and I'm going to spend some time working on the technique and then find the one song or the 2 songs that you might actually start to incorporate it on. It's another percussive thing. To contrast it with how we did like this, all these fingers strumming together, there's a way, going like this, it kind of looks like I'm going to say hang loose, but where you're like catching the finger on the palm of your hand, and so that it creates like this more of a snap. Literally, you're like it's like you're giving a woody to the strings. Don't interpret that the wrong way. A nuggie? What did you call it when you flick somebody in the head? You know, that's what we're doing here. So you can experiment with that because you can get more accurate too. You can just focus on one or two strings to get a really sharp attack as a different kind of accent. One thing that does come into play in no matter what tuning you're in or what style you're playing is the amount of string squeak we can get when we're switching from one chord to the next. Now, it's going to depend, different strings, if you have elixir strings, which are like the coated strings, or D'Addario makes some of those as well, I believe, they tend to squeak less. But what they're doing is because they're coated, there's less of these ridges on the wound strings sliding on your finger. Now, when they're coated, it's just a smoother, smoother surface, so it doesn't squeak as much. It still is some, but another way to help minimize it a little bit, and this really comes, I find this more often when I'm doing two-hand tapping work, which is a whole other workshop. But when you're playing, is where we get the worst squeak is when we lift up our fingers and they're still in contact with, and we're moving to the next chord, where there's no actual note being played, but it's because our fingers are just barely touching. And so the lighter we're touching the string, the more it squeaks. So there's a way to apply a little bit more pressure to it, which will help minimize some of that stuff. The pressure is not going to take care of it altogether. In the end, the goal is just for cleaner playing, so that when you're transitioning from chords, you're able to either come off the strings enough so that you're not in contact with it to squeak. Because you maybe have noticed that about your playing. Sometimes when we're moving from chord to chord, whether in standard tuning or alto tuning, slides in general are going to be noisy. But sometimes we're playing, say, in standard tuning, and we're going to another chord that's not even a slide, to get to it. But it's the way that we pick up our fingers. I'm trying to if I play a G chord, and if I move my fingers at all when I pick it up, it's going to encourage a squeak. So it's trying to be really clean about how we grab our chords and how we release them. So that'll be something just to kind of always keep in the back of your mind. If you're starting to notice a lot of squeaking in your playing, focus on not letting your fingers have any pushing motion to them when you're releasing those fingers. And if you do have to slide a chord, keeping a little bit of pressure on the string. If you don't want the note to ring out, it's kind of finding that that subtle balance, and it's every string is going to behave slightly differently. So spend some time with that just to keep your guitar playing cleaner. Because those squeaks, especially when you're plugged in, you don't even have to be plugged in, but pretty soon if you're a really squeaky player, they almost ring louder because they're always in the same frequency. So a listener starts to hear that in the context of the song, and it just goes eh, 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 eh. And pretty soon that's all they can notice. So, and we want to make people happy, right, when we play? So cleaner playing does that. As we're getting up to kind of wrapping things up here a little bit, and again, this has kind of just been laying a whole bunch of things on the table for you to it's like an appetizer tray. I think of these little things as salt and pepper, or things that you can kind of take to your songs and add just a little bit of this here, a little bit of that there. To your liking, to your taste, again, as we come back to that. Something else, just in general, when I talk about taking, when you're playing, if you perform, or even if you don't, if you find yourself playing multiple songs and you start to feel that they're sounding similar to one another, sometimes there's different reasons for that. Maybe it's in the same key. Maybe you're playing the same chords. You're playing G, C, and D, and you have a lot of chords in that because those are your favorite chords, or they're the ones that are most easy to play. Once we've got the facility to execute those songs, and we want to figure out how to make them feel different, the things that make songs feel the same chords, or same key, they can start to sound the same even if they're the same chord shapes, G, C, and D, but capoed in different places, because the way that the notes move together start to feel like a familiar pattern, even though we're in a different key. So, and the other thing is similar tempos. Now, the ways that we can diversify this. One, of course, if we want to stay in the same key, we talked a little bit about changing up the tone of it. You know, maybe one song is with a pick, the next song is more finger-picked. They'll just automatically start to feel different. One thing that we're going to get into, we talked about this a little bit when we talked about the partial capos, because we had to figure out if we wanted to move a capo up the neck and transpose our chords, play different chord shapes, but still stay in the original key. Now that's a great way to contrast a song. If you know that, well, the key of G works really great for my voice, but I want to play this song differently than the previous song I played in G. So the way that we can do it is, you know, finding where we can put the capo to transpose to play different chord shapes, so that the key is staying the same, but the shapes that we play and the relationships that they have to each other, the way that the notes move within each of those chords, feels different than the other song that may have come just before that's still in the same key. And in the guided practice this week, there's going to be a big PDF or a big handout to download, and it's going to have basically a way to say, okay, here's some songs that I need to figure out how to contrast them with the way that I play now. And it's going to show you, one, where you can move the capo to stay in the same key, and what your chord shapes would be, to say, okay, I'm going to apply that to this song. Or you can say, okay, now I want to take the same song and I want to try it with a partial capo. Now I want to try it with dadgad tuning, or now I want to try it with the CGD, GBD tuning that we did the last 2 weeks, and give you capo positions or partial capo positions where that would be on the neck of the guitar, so that you'll stay in the same original key that you originally were, you know, that you wanted to keep it in. But I think there's maybe 7 different variations on that table to say, we've got your original song in standard tuning. Okay, let's see. So it's it looks like 7 different ways going from left to right how we could play. Well, actually, it'd probably come down to 6, because there are places where it says not applicable because the capo position might be too high. So some of them have 1 or 2 positions that don't actually work because you can't get the capos up high enough to stay in the original key. But it gives you 6 or 7 different ways that you can play the exact same song. This will get you started to find which one do I like the best. And so it kind of gives you your own grab bag of a way to diversify one song that you feel needs a little extra love to make it a little bit more special than it is now, perhaps. So spend some time with that, and that can just kind of be in your back pocket as a way to take any song and just find ways to mix it up on top of these right-hand techniques, things that we're talking about. Because as we change the tone of what we're playing, it changes how songs are received, you know. And this is where I'm kind of going off on a little bit of philosophy of this whole idea of tone control. With acoustic guitar, it is an incredibly expressive instrument. Typically, when we come to the instrument, whether we played a electric guitar before or not, when we come to the instrument, we learn the chords, we learn how to strum, we learn how to do them both at the same time. Then maybe we learn some finger picking patterns. Maybe we work on our scales. Those are kind of like the building blocks to all of this. But if we just do those things, play chords, strum, finger picking patterns, and scales, with no attention to, aside from the strumming part, no attention to how the right hand executes what's happening over here. So maybe we'll take out strumming. Chords, scales, well, finger picking is still right hand as well. Okay, I'm catching up with myself. Is that how we execute things with the right hand is going to totally change what's happening down here. And then when you compile that with the idea of being able to try different capo positions or tunings to create this, take the same song and morph it into a completely different sound, and yet it could still be the same. It'll still be the same song, but the character of it will change just due to the whole capo and tuning aspect. So my goal from week 1 was to introduce a bunch of different things that you could try. And again, I've always said, it doesn't mean that you take every one of these and you throw them all onto one song. But when you take the songs that you know and you sprinkle a couple of the techniques on one, a couple different techniques on another, all of these songs are going to start to breathe in a different way. They're going to present themselves in a different way. hopefully they will excite you in a different way to say, oh, I'm able to get so much more out of this instrument. All this right-hand stuff with the percussive techniques is because this hollow-bodied instrument, I mean, it's meant to ring, and it's meant to have a percussive nature to it just by its nature. It's like a big hollow drum, you know. And if you knock on different parts of the guitar, I'm not really going to get into demonstrating this, but you've probably seen guitar players do this as well, is when they're doing percussive stuff on the body. The different types of wood, and depending on where you hit your guitar, there's different percussive natures to it, as you know, sensibilities and tones that you get from it. Things that you can do with this instrument that you can't do any of this stuff either with say an electric guitar. Now an electric guitar, the pickup will get some of these sounds, but this is like a living, breathing instrument. And if you come down to the, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, because if you play at home, play with your friends, play unplugged acoustic, all this stuff is going to work. If you play at open mics or even you're gigging, depending on, some of these things are so subtle that depending on what your pickup system is, the way that we get these sounds is because this is an acoustic instrument. It's kind of breathes, it moves air. Now, in order to capture some of these things, we need a pickup that also kind of gets those things, which is typically like a internal microphone or a contact pickup, which is like picks up the resonance of the top. So just things to think about, and maybe that's something that we could actually specialize in another workshop, to talk about electronics and how do you get the acoustic guitar to present all the things that you're trying to do in the best way that's natural and sounds really good. So, so in that, you know, in the guided practice, that is going to kind of be hopefully something, a chart that you'll go back to whenever you feel a song is a little bit stuck, and after you've kind of sprinkled some of these right and left hand techniques onto the tune, and be able to find different ways to play these songs. So, long story short, this has really been less, I hope, less of a class about techniques and how to complicate and make your guitar playing more flashy and do a lot of look at me kind of stuff. To me, I want there to be a purpose behind all these different things that you add to a song. You know, does it make the song better? Does it make you love the sound of the song more? Does it make other people, make their ears perk up and feel like something special is happening? It doesn't look like he's doing anything crazy on the guitar, which is, again, I think the goal to a lot of these things, is that there are ways to make your guitar parts sound more interesting and more compelling without it looking like it's difficult to play, or without it looking like, you know, you've spent 10,000 hours practicing scales in your bedroom before ever making a public appearance. Because I think no matter what level you're at, you have something to offer in your music and how you play your songs, no matter how simple or how complicated you want them to be. And I hope that these things that we've talked about in the last 10 weeks have created kind of an artist's palette that you get to pick from and use your own colors to further diversify what it is that you are trying to accomplish and are accomplishing with your music. So with that, I think we're gonna say goodbye for now. And for those of you who are asking about some of the things that we've already talked about in previous workshops, if you haven't watched the last 9 weeks, they're all archived. You can go back and check them out. And the titles will tell you what we're covering in each of those. And hopefully there's some of those that all of you who have been with us for all 10 weeks will also go back and review and continue to grow upon each of those things and finding your own finger-picking patterns or your own alter tunings, things like that. So hopefully I've led you down a trail that you can continue on down, and there will be more workshops to come in the future, and I look forward to seeing you. Thanks for spending 10 weeks with me, whether or 1 week, wherever you are on that map. And look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks so much, everybody.